Hey, Frankie, I heard that woman sells other things besides food if you got the cash.
My name is Frank Miller. I'm an ironworker, part of a crew erecting the steel skeleton of a new distribution center on the forgotten edge of Cleveland. It's the kind of heavy, unforgiving labor that grinds a man down over the years. From the moment the pale Ohio sun cracks the horizon until it sinks away in a blaze of orange and purple, my world is the clang of metal on metal, the roar of machinery, the shouts of the foreman, and the sheer, brute weight of the iron I wrestle into place. The fine, metallic dust of the site is a second skin I can never fully wash off. It's in my hair, under my nails, in the lines of my face. It's the taste in my mouth when I wake up. My wife, Sarah, has been gone for 5 years. Cancer came for her like a thief in the night, quietly at first, then with a devastating finality. She was the architect of our small, simple life, the one who filled our home with warmth and laughter. When she died, the structure collapsed, leaving only a hollow silence. The silence in our little house became a physical presence, a constant companion that was heavier than any steel beam. Our son, Tom, lives in Columbus, a high-flying career in finance, a life I can barely picture. After Sarah's funeral, our phone calls became dutiful, then sporadic. The distance wasn't just in the miles between Cleveland and Columbus. It was an emotional chasm that had grown too wide to shout across. Now, we don't even try. My home, if you can call it that, is a cramped, rented trailer in a park full of transient workers and people down on their luck. The linoleum is peeling, and a permanent scent of stale coffee hangs in the air. The nights are the worst. I'll stand at the kitchen counter, eating a microwave burrito or a can of soup, washing it down with a cheap, bitter beer. The motions are automatic, a ritual of survival. Then, I lie down on a mattress that still holds the faint impression of where my wife used to sleep, and wait for the exhaustion to finally claim me. That particular day had been a beast. The summer heat was oppressive, shimmering in waves off the steel and asphalt. By the time the final whistle blew, my muscles were screaming in protest, my work shirt soaked through with sweat. I didn't have the energy to go back to the empty trailer, not yet. So I did what I did most nights. I walked, my boots kicking up dust, down the gravel path that led to a small, solitary food truck. It sat in a dirt lot, its generator humming, its single string of yellow bulbs casting a warm, inviting glow against the deepening twilight. It was an anchor in the vast, lonely sea of my evenings. And she was always there. Eleanor Vance. That's what I'd eventually learn her name was. She had her hair pulled back in a simple, no-nonsense tie, a clean white apron covering her clothes. Her face was a map of a life I knew nothing about, etched with lines of fatigue and something else. A quiet resilience, a deep-seated dignity. She rarely smiled, but her eyes, when they met yours, held a warmth that seemed to defy the harshness of the world around her. The first time she gave me more than a passing glance, it was like a window had been opened in a sealed room. I'd worked a 16-hour shift and collapsed onto a cracked plastic stool at her counter, feeling every one of my 67 years. I mumbled my usual order, a chili dog and a black coffee. She prepared it with an economy of motion that spoke of long practice and placed it before me. But then she added a bottle of ice-cold water, condensation beating on its surface.
"This is on the house,"
she said, her voice soft but clear over the sizzle of the grill. "You look like you've had a long day. It's important to stay hydrated in this heat, Eleanor." The words, so simple, so unexpectedly kind, struck me with an almost physical force. For 5 years, no one had shown me that kind of casual, unprompted concern. I was a ghost at the construction site, a number on a payroll. I was an empty chair at my son's holiday table. I was a silent customer at the grocery store. But in that moment, under the warm glow of her food truck lights, her small act of charity made me feel solid again. It made me feel seen. From then on, that truck wasn't just a place to get a cheap meal. It became my sanctuary, the only place in the world I didn't feel entirely alone. I fell into a routine. Every evening, I'd take the same stool at the far end of the counter. She'd see me coming and give me a small, subtle nod of recognition. That nod became the focal point of my day. I'd spend hours wrestling with my thoughts, a silent, one-sided conversation playing out in my head. Ask her how her day was. Tell her the chili dog was good. Just say something, you old fool. But the words always died on my lips, strangled by years of disuse. Then came the night Mike sat down next to me. Mike was a loud, beefy man from the concrete crew, the kind of guy who thrived on rumors and cheap beer. He slammed his fist on the counter for service and then leaned in towards me, his voice a conspiratorial whisper that smelled of stale cigarettes.
"Hey, Frankie,"
he began, nudging me with his elbow. "You're here every night. You ever get the special, Mike?" He jerked his head in Eleanor's direction. She was at the other end of the counter, wiping it down, her movements graceful and deliberate.
"Word is,"
he continued, a smirk spreading across his face, "she does more than just sling hash. Some of the boys from the night shift say that if you're the last customer to leave, and you flash the right amount of cash, she offers a warmer kind of service, if you catch my drift, Mike." A sudden, sharp coldness pierced through the evening's humidity. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis. The heavy ceramic coffee mug in my hand felt slick with sweat. I stared at Eleanor, but she was no longer the kind woman who had offered me water. Under the harsh glare of Mike's words, her quiet dignity now seemed like a front, her reserved nature a clever disguise. The idea was grotesque, a desecration of the one clean place in my life. "What in God's name are you talking about, Mike? That's disgusting."
"Disgusting? Or just business?"
he shot back, laughing. "Come on, Frank, don't be so naive. A woman like that, all alone out here? You think she's making a living selling $10 meals to guys like us? It's common knowledge. She sells her body. That's how she survives, Mike." My grip tightened on the mug, my knuckles turning white. I wanted to smash it, to lash out, to defend her honor. But a sliver of ice, a cold, sharp doubt, had already lodged itself in my heart. "You're a liar, spreading filth like that."
"Hey, don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what everybody knows. It's the talk of the whole damn site. Ask around if you don't believe me."
I looked at her again, desperately searching for proof of his lie. I saw the fine lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands as she refilled the salt shakers. But I also saw the scrupulous way she kept her truck clean, the gentle patience she showed a young man who was short on change, the way her shoulders seemed to carry a weight far heavier than just her daily work. How could she be both people, the saint and the sinner? The poison of Mike's words tainted everything. The following nights were an exercise in torment. I'd watch her, scrutinizing every move, every word, every fleeting expression. Her kindness, which had once been a balm to my soul, now felt like a potential manipulation. A week later, on a cool evening when the first hints of autumn were in the air, she brought me my order.
You're quiet tonight, Frank.
It was the first time she had used my name. I was so startled I nearly dropped my fork. Just tired,
I see a lot of tired men.
she said, leaning against the counter for a rare moment of rest. But you seem to carry a different kind of tired. A heavier one, Eleanor. Her observation was so astute, so deeply perceptive, it disarmed me completely. The suspicion I'd been harboring felt cheap and shameful. She saw the real me, the lonely, grieving man hiding behind a wall of silence. In that moment, I was sure Mike was a liar. But then, a few nights after that, I saw it. A sleek, black sedan, the kind you don't see in this part of town, pulled up just as she was about to close. A man in an expensive-looking suit got out. He didn't order any food. He spoke to her in low tones, his hand resting for a moment on the small of her back. She nodded, her face unreadable, and then disappeared into the back of her truck for a few minutes before returning with a small, plain envelope, which she handed to him. The man got back in his car and drove away. It was probably nothing. A supplier, a landlord, a loan payment. There were 100 innocent explanations. But in my mind, poisoned by the rumor, it was damning evidence. The scene played over and over in my head, each viewing more vivid and incriminating than the last. The man's expensive suit, his casual intimacy, her silent compliance. The doubt came roaring back, stronger and more sickening than before. I was caught in a painful limbo, torn between the kindness my heart told me was real and the ugly possibility my eyes had just seen. The woman at the food truck was an enigma, a puzzle I couldn't solve, and her mystery had become the new, unsettling center of my shattered world. The memory of the black sedan and the man in the expensive suit became a recurring nightmare. It coiled in the back of my mind during the long, hot days at the construction site, and it was waiting for me every evening when I took my usual stool at Eleanor's truck. The easy, unspoken comfort I'd begun to find there was gone, replaced by a tense, gnawing uncertainty. I started to notice things I hadn't before, or perhaps I simply interpreted them through the toxic filter of Mike's gossip. The way she would sometimes stare off into the distance, a shadow passing over her features. The way she would flinch almost imperceptibly if a customer's voice was too loud or their gestures too abrupt. Was it just the weariness of a hard life, or was it the guarded posture of someone with something to hide? My internal battle was relentless. One moment, I'd watch her gently hand a hot dog to a child, her face softening with a rare, genuine warmth, and I'd feel a wave of shame for ever doubting her. She was a good person, I'd tell myself. A decent woman trying to make an honest living in a tough world. But then, a group of loud, boisterous men from the night shift would arrive, and their jokes would be a little too familiar, their laughter a little too pointed in her direction, and the cold knot of suspicion would tighten in my gut all over again. I was a ship without a rudder, tossed between faith and doubt, and the isolation felt more profound than ever. Several weeks passed in this miserable state of limbo. Then came an evening unlike the others. A heavy thunderstorm had rolled in late in the afternoon, washing the dust from the air and sending most of the workers scurrying home early. By the time the rain had softened to a steady drizzle, the dirt lot was nearly empty. I was the only one left, nursing a lukewarm coffee, the steam fogging the air around my hands. Eleanor was cleaning the grill, her movements slow, methodical. The silence between us was thick, broken only by the hum of the generator and the patter of rain on the metal roof. She worked for a long time, and I just sat there, unable to bring myself to leave. Finally, with everything wiped down and put away, she let out a long, weary sigh and leaned against the counter, her shoulders slumping. She looked exhausted, and something inside me, a protective instinct I hadn't felt since Sarah was sick, broke through my wall of silence. "These must be long nights for you. All alone out here." She looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten I was there. A moment passed before she answered, her voice a little rough.
"They're the only kind of nights I've got. The work doesn't do itself."
"Still, it's a lot for one person." She dried her hands on her apron and looked at me. Really looked at me, for the first time all evening.
"You're here pretty late yourself. Most nights, in fact."
Not much to go home to. The confession hung in the air, more honest than anything I'd said to another human being in 5 years. She seemed to understand. She poured the last of the coffee into 2 clean mugs, sliding one across the counter to me.
"Well, I guess the last cup of the night is always the bitterest. Might as well not drink it alone."
She came around the counter and sat on the stool next to me, a gesture of trust that made my heart ache. We sat there for a while, sipping the coffee, the quiet humming of the generator a strange, comforting cocoon around us. "My name's Frank Miller, by the way. 67. I said, feeling an absurd need to introduce myself properly after all this time. A faint smile touched her lips. "Eleanor Vance. I'm 65. "Eleanor. You've been running this truck for a while now, Eleanor."
"Over 5 years."
She confirmed, her gaze fixed on the rain-streaked darkness beyond the awning. "It was supposed to be temporary. A way to get back on my feet. Funny how temporary things can become permanent. Eleanor. I know what you mean. I thought of my trailer, the boxes I never fully unpacked. If you don't mind me asking, are you married? A husband, Frank?" I trailed off, feeling I was prying. She shook her head, a flicker of old pain in her eyes. "Divorced, a lifetime ago. 30 years, maybe more. Now I live alone in a small rental apartment on the west side." "Eleanor. I'm alone, too," I offered, the words coming more easily now. "My wife, Sarah, she passed 5 years ago. Got a son, but he's got his own life. Frank."
"I have a daughter,"
she said, her voice barely a whisper. "She's grown, of course. We don't talk much anymore, Eleanor." In that moment, the wall between us dissolved completely. We were no longer just a customer and a vendor. We were 2 solitary souls, adrift on the same lonely sea, recognizing in each other the same deep-seated ache of loss and fractured family. The warmth of that connection was intoxicating, a powerful antidote to the years of cold isolation. I felt a desperate need to know that she was who I hoped she was, to wipe away the ugly stain of the rumor for good. The conversation had created a bubble of intimacy, and in my foolishness, I thought that bubble was strong enough to withstand anything. I thought I could just ask. The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop them, clumsy and crude. "Listen, Eleanor," I began, my voice suddenly thick. Some of the guys from the site, they say things. They say that sometimes, at night, you do other work. Frank." The sentence wasn't even finished, but the change was instantaneous and devastating. It was as if a switch had been flipped, plunging the warm, gentle space between us into absolute zero. Her face went pale, her eyes widening with a look of profound shock, which was quickly replaced by a cold, hard fury. The coffee mug she was holding, she placed it on the counter with a sharp, deliberate click. Her hands, which had been relaxed, were now clenched into tight fists.
So that's it.
She said, her voice flat and brittle, stripped of all its earlier warmth. That's what this has all been about. The lingering, the small talk. You were just another one of them, sizing me up. Eleanor. No, it's not like that. I heard things, and I didn't believe them, I swear.
You didn't believe them?
She shot back, her voice dripping with ice and betrayal. Then why ask? Why bring that filth here? For a moment, I thought you were different. Eleanor. She stood up, her back ramrod straight. The hurt in her eyes was so raw, so deep, it was like a physical blow. I had single-handedly destroyed the fragile trust she had offered me. I had proven myself to be exactly the kind of man she likely spent her whole life guarding against.
Get out,
she said, her voice low but unyielding. It's time to close. Eleanor, please. I'm so sorry. I'm an old fool, I didn't mean. But she had already turned her back to me. It was like a steel door had slammed shut between us. Her shoulders were rigid, a wall of stone. I tried to apologize again, but the words choked in my throat. The shame was a physical weight, crushing the air from my lungs. I finally, miserably, stood up from the stool. I'm truly sorry, Eleanor. She didn't respond. She didn't even turn around. I stumbled away from the light of the truck, back into the cold, drizzling rain. The walk back to my trailer was the longest of my life. Each step was a fresh wave of self-loathing. I had found a tiny, flickering candle in the vast darkness of my life, and with my own clumsy, careless hands, I had snuffed it out. The next day, my shift was a blur of misery. I went through the motions, my body on autopilot, while my mind replayed my disastrous conversation with Eleanor over and over. When the whistle blew, I practically ran to the dirt lot, a desperate, half-formed apology ready on my lips. But the lot was empty. The spot where her truck always stood was just a dark, damp patch of earth. Tacked to a telephone pole was a small piece of cardboard, the words scrawled in black marker, the ink already starting to run from the lingering dampness. Closed indefinitely. My heart sank. The finality of that word, indefinitely, felt like a death sentence. The next day was the same, and the day after that. An entire week passed, and the empty lot became a gaping wound in my daily routine, a constant, mocking reminder of my stupidity. The other guys on the crew noticed.
Hey, Frankie, where's your girlfriend?
He called out one afternoon, a cruel laugh in his voice. Did you finally scare her away for good, Mike? I ignored him, the shame burning in my gut. He was right. I had scared her away. My foolish, reckless question had driven her off, had possibly ruined her livelihood. The thought was unbearable. By the 10th day, the despair had settled into a heavy, permanent ache in my chest. I realized I couldn't just wait anymore. I might never see her again, might never get the chance to truly apologize. As I sat in my silent trailer that night, staring at the peeling linoleum, a fragment of our last conversation surfaced in my memory. I live alone in a small rental apartment on the west side. It was nothing, a needle in a haystack the size of a city. No address, no street name. but it was all I had. A desperate, impossible hope began to bloom in the barren wasteland of my regret. I had to find her. I had to try. The decision to search for Eleanor on the west side of Cleveland was one born of pure desperation, a wild shot in the dark. I had no address, no last name, just a vague geographical area and the image of her face etched into my mind. I took the city bus, a mode of transportation I hadn't used in decades, and felt like a foreigner in my own city. The bus rattled and groaned, carrying me through neighborhoods that shifted from industrial decay to blocks of modest, aging houses and low-slung brick apartment buildings. It was a world away from the dust and steel of the construction site. I got off at a stop that seemed as good as any and just started walking. The task was monumental, its absurdity pressing down on me with every step. I felt like a fool, an old man on a hopeless quest. My strategy, if you could call it that, was to ask anyone who looked like they'd been in the neighborhood for a while. I approached a mailman on his route, a woman watering her flowers, a group of old men playing checkers in a small park. "Excuse me." I'd start, my voice hoarse with anxiety. "I'm looking for a woman. About my age, 60s. Runs a food truck. Her name is Eleanor." "Frank." Most people just shook their heads, their faces blank with indifference or suspicion. A few looked at me with pity. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, and my hope began to fade with the light. My back ached, my feet were sore, and the crushing weight of my mistake felt heavier than ever. I was about to give up, to turn back and resign myself to the silence of my trailer, to the solitary life I had so carelessly reinforced. I was standing on a street corner, feeling the full, bitter taste of defeat, when I saw her. She was walking out of a small neighborhood grocery store, carrying two heavy-looking bags. From a distance, she looked different, smaller and more fragile than she did behind the counter of her truck. She was wearing a simple pink cardigan over a plain dress, and for the first time, I saw her not as the food truck lady, but simply as a woman. A woman who looked tired, burdened, and utterly alone. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me, immediately followed by a fresh surge of guilt. I called out her name, my voice cracking. "Eleanor." She froze, her head snapping up. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then instantly became guarded, her body tensing as if preparing for a blow. She clutched her grocery bags to her chest like a shield. I hurried towards her, stopping a respectful distance away, my hands raised slightly as if to show I meant no harm. "Eleanor, I know I have no right. But I had to find you. I had to tell you how sorry I am." My words came out in a desperate, jumbled rush. What I said, it was the stupidest, cruelest thing I've ever done. I was repeating ugly gossip like a fool, and I wounded you. I haven't had a moment's peace since. I am so sorry. Frank. She stared at me, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched on, filled only by the distant sound of traffic. Her face was pale, and I could see the dark circles under her eyes. She looked even more exhausted than the last time I'd seen her. Finally, she let out a long, shuddering breath, a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire world.
"How did you find me?"
"You mentioned you lived on the west side. I just walked. I've been walking for hours." She looked down at my dusty work boots, then back up at my face. She must have seen the genuine, wretched remorse there, because the hard line of her jaw softened just a fraction.
You'd better come inside.
she said, her tone weary. You're making a scene. People are staring. Eleanor. It was not a warm invitation, but it was more than I deserved. I followed her silently to a 3-story brick apartment building and up a flight of stairs to her door. Her apartment was small, just 2 rooms, but it was meticulously clean and tidy. It was also sparse, furnished with old, worn pieces that spoke of a long and difficult financial struggle. But what drew my eye immediately was the collection of orange and white prescription bottles on the small table next to the sofa. There were at least half a dozen of them, a silent testament to a hidden battle. Are you sick?
It's an old problem.
She said, setting her groceries on the kitchen counter with a wince. The pain in my back got bad a few days ago. That's the real reason I couldn't open the truck. I could barely get out of bed. Eleanor. She turned to face me, her eyes meeting mine. But your words. They were the final straw. They took away my will to even try. Eleanor. The guilt I felt was a physical thing, a hot stone in my stomach. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I can't say it enough. Frank.
I know.
She said quietly. You came all this way. You might as well sit. Eleanor. She brought 2 glasses of water, and we sat in the fading light, the room filled with the ghosts of my foolishness and her pain.
I need you to understand why I was so angry.
She began, her voice low and steady. For 5 years, I've worked in that truck. I've endured the looks, the whispers, the crude jokes. People see a woman my age, alone, and their minds jump to the worst conclusions. They call me the woman who sells food by day and her body by night. Eleanor. It's not true. I said, more a plea than a statement.
No, it's not.
She said, a bitter sadness in her voice. But it's not entirely a lie, either. And that's the part that has haunted me for years. Eleanor. She took a deep breath, and the story she had held inside for so long finally came pouring out. After my divorce, I was left with nothing. I had a daughter to raise, to put through college. The debt was crushing me. The food truck barely covered the bills. A regular customer, a wealthy man, he made me an offer. He said his friends had a private poker game every week, and he'd pay me very well just to come and serve them drinks. Just serve drinks, he promised. Nothing more. Eleanor. Her eyes were filled with a deep, old shame. At first, I said no. But then my daughter's tuition was late, and I was facing eviction. So I did it, a few times. It was just as he said. I poured whiskey and brought them snacks. That's all. But someone saw me leaving with him late one night. And that's all it took for the rumors to start. The rumors that have followed me ever since. I stopped doing it years ago, as soon as my daughter graduated. But the reputation, it stuck. Eleanor. My heart broke for her. The story was so much sadder and more complicated than the ugly gossip Mike had been peddling. It was a story of a mother's desperation, not a woman's immorality. Eleanor, that's not something to be ashamed of. You did what you had to do for your child. And what about these? I asked gently, nodding towards the pill bottles. Is the back pain from the long hours at the truck? Frank. She looked down at her hands, her knuckles white. The truck doesn't help, but that's not where it started. Eleanor. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was a fragile whisper. The pills are for a spinal injury. And for depression. They're souvenirs from my ex-husband. Eleanor. The air left my lungs. The casual cruelty of my question about her other work came crashing down on me with new, horrific force.
He was a violent man when he drank.
She said, her gaze distant, lost in a painful memory. For over 10 years, I endured it. For my daughter's sake. One night, he got angry about something. I don't even remember what. He pushed me. I fell down a flight of stairs. That's how my spine was damaged. That's why I have to take these pills every day just to be able to move. That's why I live with this pain. Eleanor. The room was silent. The story of her life, a story of abuse, desperation, and the cruel judgment of strangers, filled the small space. She was a survivor of a war one couldn't even imagine, and I had carelessly, ignorantly, thrown salt on her deepest wounds. The shame I felt was so profound it was suffocating. I finally understood the guarded look in her eyes, the way she flinched, the deep well of sadness she carried. Eleanor, I said, my voice thick with emotion. There are no words to say how sorry I am. Not just for what I said, but for everything you've been through. Frank, I felt a powerful, overwhelming need to help, to do something, anything, to atone for my part in her pain and to ease her burden. Is there anything I can do? Anything at all?
There's nothing to be done. This is just my life.
She said with a tone of utter resignation. That's not true. I insisted, leaning forward. You shouldn't be alone in this. Let me help. You have to see a doctor for your back, right? Let me take you. Tomorrow. I can drive you, help you get there and back. Frank. She looked at me, surprised, her eyes searching my face for my motive. She was so used to cruelty that simple kindness was suspicious.
Why would you do that?
Because it's the right thing to do. I said simply, because no one should have to carry that kind of pain alone. Please, let me do this one small thing. Frank. She studied my face for a long time. I held her gaze, trying to pour all of my sincerity, all of my regret, all of my newfound respect for her into that single look. Slowly, hesitantly, she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod.
Thank you, Frank.
She whispered. The walk back to the bus stop felt different. The despair was gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative sense of purpose. A connection had been forged between us, not of romance, but of shared pain and the quiet promise of support. I had found her, and in doing so, I felt like I was finally beginning to find a part of my own lost humanity again. The weeks that followed my discovery of Eleanor's apartment were transformative. They marked a quiet, profound shift in the very architecture of my life. My existence, once a monotonous, solitary march towards the grave, now had a focal point, a purpose. That purpose was Eleanor. The day after our emotional conversation, I arrived at her building half an hour early for her doctor's appointment. I had stopped at a small market and bought a basket of fresh fruit, bright red apples, sweet-smelling oranges, and a small carton of blueberries. It felt like a clumsy, inadequate offering, but when she opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise, and a genuine, fragile smile touched her lips.
Frank, you didn't have to do this.
I wanted to. I said, feeling my own face flush with an unaccustomed warmth. It's better than all those pills, anyway. Frank. The appointment was at a large, impersonal clinic downtown. I saw how she shrank in on herself in the crowded waiting room, how she clutched her purse with white-knuckled hands. I understood then that her pain wasn't just physical. It was interwoven with a deep-seated fear and a sense of helplessness. I sat beside her, not saying much, but making my presence a steady, solid thing she could lean on. When she was called back, the doctor, a brisk, efficient man who seemed to see her only as a collection of symptoms on a chart, confirmed what she already knew. The damage to her spine was severe, the result of old, untreated trauma. He recommended surgery, speaking of spinal fusions and physical therapy in a detached, clinical tone. I watched Eleanor's face as he spoke, saw the flicker of hope in her eyes extinguished by the shadow of despair when she asked about the cost. The number the doctor quoted was astronomical, a figure so far beyond her reach it might as well have been 1,000,000 miles. On the ride back to her apartment, she was silent, the weight of the diagnosis pressing down on her. The small hope of a life without pain had been presented and then cruelly snatched away.
I'll just have to keep living with it,
she said, her voice barely a whisper, as we stood outside her door. There's no other choice, Eleanor. There's always a choice, Eleanor. I found myself saying, with a conviction that surprised me. We just haven't found it yet, Frank. That day marked the beginning of a new routine for us. I would finish my shift and go straight to her apartment. I started cooking for her. I'd learned a few things in the years after Sarah got sick, simple dishes like stews and roasts. I found a surprising joy in preparing a meal for someone else again, in filling her small, quiet apartment with the comforting aromas of cooking food. We would eat together at her small kitchen table, and in those shared moments, the walls around her heart, built up over years of pain and betrayal, began to crumble, brick by fragile brick. She told me about her daughter, Jessica. She spoke of her with a fierce, aching love, a love tinged with the profound sorrow of their estrangement. Jessica had married a successful man who was ashamed of Eleanor's past, of the rumors that clung to her like a shroud.
He heard the stories,
she explained one evening, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He told Jessica that a woman like me wasn't fit to be a grandmother to their future children. And Jessica, she chose him. She stopped calling. It's been almost 2 years. Eleanor, listening to her, I felt a familiar pang of my own parental failure. I told her about Tom, about the chasm of silence that had opened between us after Sarah's death. I confessed my regrets, the countless times I had failed to connect with him, the wall I had built around my own grief that had ended up shutting him out.
We're a fine pair, aren't we?
She said with a wry, sad smile. 2 old fools with broken hearts and broken families. Eleanor. Maybe. I replied, reaching across the table and covering her hand with my own. Her skin was soft, her hand trembling slightly at my touch. Or maybe we're just 2 people who finally found someone who understands. Frank. The day the news came, it felt like a physical blow. It was a Tuesday, and the foreman gathered us around at the end of the shift. The project was ahead of schedule, he announced with a proud grin. The steelwork would be finished in 2 weeks. After that, our crew was being laid off. A cheer went up from some of the younger men, eager for a break. But for me, the words were a death knell. My job, the one constant in my chaotic life, was ending. It meant I would have no reason to stay in Cleveland. The logical next step was to follow the work, to find another site in another city, to go back to the transient, lonely existence I had known for so long. The thought of leaving Eleanor was unbearable. In just over a month, she had become the center of my world. The idea of returning to a life without her, without our shared meals, our quiet conversations, our comfortable silences, was like staring into a black, empty void. I walked to her apartment that evening with a heavy heart, the foreman's words echoing in my mind. She knew the moment she saw my face that something was wrong.
Frank, what is it?
The job's ending, I said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. 2 weeks, and then it's done. Frank. A look of alarm crossed her face. The color drained from her cheeks. So you'll be leaving, then? Moving on to the next site? Eleanor. I could. I said, stepping closer to her. That's what a man in my line of work does. He follows the steel. Frank. I took a deep breath. But the truth is, Eleanor, I don't want to go anywhere. Frank. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, searching my face. I want to stay here. I continued, my voice growing stronger, filled with a certainty that came from the deepest part of my soul. Because you're here. In all my 67 years, I've never felt what I feel when I'm with you. It's like after years of winter, the sun has finally come out. I can't go back to the cold. I won't, Frank. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over and tracing paths down her cheeks. I reached out and gently wiped one away with my thumb.
Oh, Frank.
She whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I feel it, too. I've been so afraid to admit it, even to myself. But you've brought me back to life. Eleanor. In that moment, all the pain, all the loneliness, all the years of quiet despair seemed to fall away. I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a kiss of wild passion, but something far deeper, a gentle, tender affirmation of a love that had taken root in the barren soil of our shared grief. It was a promise of a new beginning. But our fragile new world was not allowed to remain peaceful for long. The first assault came a few days later, in the form of a phone call. It was Tom. His voice was cold, distant.
Dad, I'm glad I caught you. I was concerned.
Concerned? About what?
I got a call from Aunt Carol.
He said, referring to Sarah's sister who still lived in a suburb of Cleveland. She told me some disturbing things. She said you're involved with some woman. A woman who runs a food truck. A woman with a very bad reputation. Tom. That's none of Carol's business. And it's none of yours. I said, my voice tight with anger.
It is my business when it reflects on this family. When it disrespects Mom's memory.
His voice rose, laced with a self-righteous fury. Dad, people are saying she's a prostitute. And you're living with her? Have you lost your mind? Tom. You watch your mouth. I snarled, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. You don't know Eleanor. You don't know the first thing about her. She is a good, kind, decent woman who has been through hell. And these vicious rumors are nothing but lies spread by cruel, ignorant people. Frank.
So the whole town is lying?
He shot back, his tone mocking. Dad, I'm your son. I'm trying to protect you. You need to end this. Get away from her. Come down to Columbus. You can stay with me for a while. We'll get you back on your feet. Tom. I'm not going anywhere. I said, my voice low and firm with a resolve that was absolute. Eleanor is my life now. If you can't accept that, then I guess there's nothing more to say. Frank.
So you're choosing her? Over your own son? Over your family?
The disbelief and anger in his voice crackled over the line. I'm not choosing anyone over anyone. I said, my heart aching with the pain of the ultimatum. I'm choosing to be happy. I'm choosing a life with a woman I love. I'm asking you, as my son, to try and understand. Frank.
I understand that you're throwing your life away on some piece of trash.
He spat, the words venomous and final. "Don't call me again, Dad. Not until you've come to your senses." "Tom." The line went dead. I stood there, the phone still pressed to my ear, the silence a roaring in my head. The new beginning I had dreamed of with Eleanor was already under siege. The world, it seemed, was not yet finished with trying to tear us apart. The silence that followed the phone call with my son was heavier and more profound than any I had ever experienced in my empty trailer. It was a silence filled with the wreckage of a relationship, the bitter finality of his words echoing in the small room. I sank onto the edge of the sofa, the dead phone still clutched in my hand, a terrible, tearing grief warring with a white-hot, protective rage. My son, my own flesh and blood, had chosen the sterile comfort of public opinion over the happiness of his own father. He had judged Eleanor, and by extension me, without a shred of understanding or compassion. When Eleanor found me sitting there in the dark, she knew immediately. She didn't have to ask. She simply came and sat beside me, her presence a quiet, comforting anchor in my storm of emotions. I told her everything, every cruel word, every ultimatum. As I spoke, I watched the familiar, weary sadness settle back into her features. A deep, painful guilt clouded her eyes.
"This is my fault, Frank,"
she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've brought this into your life. I've cost you your son." "Eleanor." "No," I said, turning to her and taking her hands in mine. They were cold as ice. "This is not your fault. This is Tom's fault, his prejudice, his weakness. You are the best thing that has happened to me in years, Eleanor. You are not the cause of this problem. You are the reason I have the strength to face it, Frank." But my strength was tested daily. The world outside the four walls of Eleanor's apartment grew colder, more hostile. My last 2 weeks at the construction site were unbearable. Mike and his cronies would make snide remarks just loud enough for me to hear. The few men who had been friendly now avoided my gaze. The poison of gossip had done its work, and I was now an outcast, the old fool who had taken up with the town whore. The hostility followed us into the community. A simple trip to the grocery store became an ordeal. People would stop talking when we entered an aisle. They would whisper behind their hands, their eyes following us with a mixture of pity and contempt. I could bear it for myself, but I saw the devastating toll it was taking on Eleanor. She started to retreat, the fragile blossom of confidence she had begun to show withering under the constant frost of public disapproval. She stopped wanting to go for our walks, making excuses to stay inside. The light in her eyes began to dim again, replaced by the old, familiar fear. My heart ached for her, and my anger towards the faceless, cruel world grew into a burning fire. We were prisoners in her small apartment, our love a secret to be hidden from the prying, judgmental eyes of the world. The final blow, the one that broke the stalemate of our miserable existence, arrived in a pristine, cream-colored envelope. It was thick, expensive cardstock, addressed to me in elegant, flowing calligraphy. Mr. Frank Miller. There was no mention of Eleanor. I knew what it was before I even opened it. It was a wedding invitation from my son. My hands trembled as I read the formal, impersonal script inviting me to witness the union of Thomas Miller and his bride. I was invited. Eleanor was not. She was not just uninvited. She had been deliberately, cruelly erased. I stood in the middle of the living room, holding the invitation, and a profound, clarifying calm settled over me. There was no conflict, no decision to be made. There was only one possible path forward. Eleanor saw the envelope in my hand and the look on my face.
It's from Tom, isn't it?
She asked quietly. His wedding. Eleanor. I nodded, unable to speak.
You have to go, Frank.
She said immediately, her voice filled with a desperate, self-sacrificing urgency. You must. He is your only son. You cannot let me stand in the way of this. I'll be fine. Please, you have to be there for him. Eleanor. No. I said, my voice quiet but absolute. I am not going. Frank.
Frank, don't be foolish. You'll regret it for the rest of your life.
The only thing I would regret for the rest of my life, Eleanor, is betraying you. The only thing I would regret is leaving your side to attend a celebration where you are not welcome. My life is not there anymore. It's not in Columbus, and it's not at that wedding. My life is here, with you. If they will not honor you, then they do not honor me. It's as simple as that. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in a long time, they were not tears of sorrow or shame. They were tears of relief, of a profound, soul-deep gratitude. In that moment, we both knew we could not stay in Cleveland. It was a place haunted by the ghosts of our pasts and poisoned by the prejudice of the present. That evening, we made a decision. We would leave. We would run away, not in defeat, but in defiance. Where would we go? I asked her, the idea of a new horizon opening up before us, both thrilling and terrifying.
When I was a little girl, my parents took me on a trip once. To the coast of Maine. I remember the smell of the salt in the air, the sound of the seagulls, the quiet, rugged beauty of it all. I've always dreamed of going back. To a small town by the sea, where nobody knows our names.
And so, that became our plan. We pooled our meager resources. My final paycheck and the small amount of savings I had, combined with what little Eleanor had managed to put away. It wasn't much, but we hoped it would be enough. We sold her truck for less than it was worth. We packed our few belongings into my old pickup truck, leaving behind the furniture, the ghosts, and the judgments. As we drove out of Cleveland, leaving the gray, industrial skyline in the rearview mirror, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I had been carrying for years. I reached over and took Eleanor's hand. It was the hand of a survivor, and it was the hand of my future. 6 months later, we were standing on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. We had found a small, weathered cottage for rent in a quiet fishing village in Maine. The air was clean and sharp with the scent of salt and pine. Below us, the waves crashed against the rocky shore in a timeless, soothing rhythm. Our new life was simple, peaceful beyond my wildest dreams. We planted a small garden in the backyard, our hands in the rich, dark earth. We walked the beach every morning, collecting sea glass and watching the lobster boats head out for the day. Eleanor's health had transformed. The constant, gnawing pain in her back had eased with the release of her chronic stress. More importantly, the lines of fear and sadness on her face had softened, replaced by a quiet, steady serenity. In this place where no one knew our story, we were not a scandal. We were just Frank and Eleanor, the quiet older couple who lived by the sea. The sun was setting, casting a brilliant, fiery path across the water. Eleanor leaned her head on my shoulder, and we watched the spectacle in comfortable silence.
Do you ever regret it, Frank?
She asked softly. Losing your son? Leaving everything you knew behind? Eleanor. I turned and looked at her, at this incredible, resilient woman who had taught me the meaning of courage. I saw the love in her eyes, a love that had weathered the cruelest of storms. Never, I said, my voice filled with a certainty that was as deep and vast as the ocean before us. How can I regret anything when I have this? Every day with you is a gift I never thought I'd receive. Frank. We held each other, two souls who had found their harbor in life's twilight. The world had judged us, my own family had condemned us, but none of it mattered. In order to protect the most precious person in the world, we had to have the courage to stand against the prejudice of our families and our society. We chose that courage, and it led us here, to this moment of perfect, unassailable peace. Our love, which found us so late in life, had finally, beautifully, bloomed. For anyone out there who finds themselves in a similar storm, I hope our story can be a small beacon of light. I hope it can give you the courage to choose love. It is a choice you will never regret.